As we gather together, we acknowledge that the land upon which our church and homes exist is the ancestral land stolen from the people of the Shoshone-Bannock, the Shoshone-Paiute, Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai, and Nez Perce nations, along with many other tribes whose names have been lost in history. We acknowledge that our presence here today is founded upon the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples. With this acknowledgement, we wish to demonstrate our ongoing commitment to the work of dismantling the legacies of settler colonialism. We honor indigenous peoples' connection to the land and support their right to sovereignty.
Good morning. So good to see all of you here this morning. Welcome to the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'm the Reverend Sara LaWall. It is my great honor to serve this beloved community. And I'm joined today by Sarah Googe, who is serving as our celebrant this morning. So you've got the Sarahs up here with you today. All who join us here in the spirit of curiosity, love, and justice are welcome this morning. We are a community gathered to nurture spiritual growth, real connection, and faithful action for a better world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, your presence here is a blessing. We want to welcome those who are worshiping with us virtually. We are so glad that you are there. Let's take a moment to turn and wave to the back cameras back there, reminding each other that we worship together, connected, beyond the walls of our sanctuary. We know it takes a lot of courage to introduce yourself to a new community, whether in person or virtually. So to our newcomers among us this morning, a special welcome. We are glad that you have chosen us today. We invite you to introduce yourself in the chat and after the service so that we can warmly welcome you, and invite you to fill out our newcomer form in the entryways and a link on the chat so that we can get you connected to all that is happening in our fellowship. And there are a lot of opportunities to serve and to meet others, and I want to share a few of those opportunities with you. First, the Social Justice Council is sponsoring a cold weather gear drive, not just clothing, but gear, for those experiencing homelessness, living on the street, living in their cars. So you can bring your gear here to the church through next Sunday, November 20th, sleeping bags, blankets, boots, coats, anything you can those hand warmer thingies, anything you can think of, we will welcome. We are also collecting hygiene kits, toothbrushes, toothpaste, floss, that sort of thing. So feel free to join in that effort. Thanks to Mark Bussolini, who is heading that up. Where are you, Mark? There you are. Waving over nebulously somewhere. Thank you, Mark, for spearheading that for us. We really appreciate it. I also am delighted to share with you that our nursery space not only is open, but now is fully staffed. We are delighted to welcome, here she is, Sangam Stanzak. Back there, our new child care coordinator. So Sangam will be in the nurseries on Sunday, be coordinating nursery care. Volunteers are always appreciated, needed, and welcome. And so you can talk to Stanzak about helping support childcare and nursery care on Sundays and during the week, during our programs when childcare is also needed. And I also want to remind our community that next Sunday is our annual Apple Communion, which we haven't done together in person in more than 2 years. Like all these firsts again. So those of you that are worshiping with us in person, this is a really lively, festive, multi-generational service where we share apples together in a ritual. Those of you that will be joining us virtually, we just remind you to have an apple at the ready so that you can join us in that part of the service as well. Each month, this fellowship donates 25% of its unpledged plate offering to an organization that aligns with our social justice mission. For the month of November, that plate partner is the Wassmuth Center for Human Rights, working to promote respect for human dignity and diversity through education and foster individual responsibility to work for peace and justice. We're really delighted that the Wassmuth Center is in our midst and that we get to be partners with them this month and year-round. Really, we're just generously supporting them this month, but we are year-round partners with all of our plate partners. There are many ways that you can make a financial gift to contribute to the ministries of this fellowship and our plate partner, virtually, online on our website, and here in person. However you choose to give, you nurture this community, and we are most grateful. Our spiritual theme for this month of November is change. And today's service explores facing that final change of life, death, and how we can work to embrace it with depth and meaning and grace. So as we enter more fully into this time of worship together, let us take a breath together. Breathe, knowing that you are connected to one another, to this community, to your body, to our planet. Allow your breath to offer you a moment of stillness, to tune in to your spiritual center, and listen deeply to your heart's longing. Thou art the song of my heart in the morning. Thou art the dawn of truth in my soul. Thou art the dew of the roses adorning. Thou art the woven whole. Thine is the grace to be steadfast in danger. Thine is the peace that none can destroy. Thine is the face of the need-riven stranger. Thine are the wings of joy. Thou art the deep, to the deep in me calling. Thou art a lamp where my feet shall tread. Thy way is steep past the peril of falling. Thou art my daily bread. Thine be the praise of my spirit uplifted. Thou art the sea to each flowing stream. Thine be the days that are gathered and sifted. Thou art the deathless dream.
Each week, we light a flaming chalice, a symbol of our free faith, a beacon of hope, love, and justice. We join in this lighting in solidarity and community with thousands of other Unitarian Universalists, lighting chalices today in churches, homes, and in virtual spaces, reminding us that we are connected to one another and to a larger community of faith and love. Today, we have a first-time chalice lighter with us. We invite a child to light the chalice as a reminder of our hope for the future. As Aiden Applegate lights the chalice here in the sanctuary, for our virtual community, if you have a chalice nearby, you are invited to light it with us this morning, then share in the chat where your chalice is lit.
We are proud to announce our first-time chalice lighter, Aiden Applegate. Aiden is the son of Lydia and Doug, and the caring and kind brother to Katie, Belle, and Ruby. His favorite activity is playing video games, and he loves penguins. Thank you, Aiden.
With our collective chalices lit in all of our spaces, we offer you this call to worship. As we think about November's theme of change, this morning we are invited to reflect upon that final change, the transition from life into death. The poet Jane Kenyon asks us not to rage against the dying of the light, but rather to look toward death with acceptance and grace. Let evening come. Let the light of the late afternoon shine through chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in the long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to air in the lung, let evening come. Let evening come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you'll join me in getting cozy wherever and however you are seated, and get ready for our time for all ages. Our story this morning is Badger's Parting Gifts by Susan Varley. We are going to be thinking about our second principle, the belief that everyone deserves kindness and compassion in our relationships. And we are using this principle to explore the wonderful gifts that other people bring into our lives. Let's listen. Badger was dependable, reliable, and always ready to help when help was needed. He was also very old, and he knew almost everything. Badger was so old that he knew he must soon die. Badger wasn't afraid of death. Dying meant only that he would leave his body behind, and as his body didn't work as well as it had in days gone by, Badger wasn't too concerned about that. His only worry was how his friends would feel when he was gone. Hoping to prepare them, Badger had told them that someday soon he would be going down the long tunnel, and he hoped they wouldn't be too sad when it happened. One day, as Badger was watching Mole and Frog race down the hillside, he felt especially old and tired. He wished more than anything that he could run with them, but he knew his old legs wouldn't let him. He watched Mole and Frog for a long time, enjoying the sight of his friends having a good time. It was late when he arrived home. He wished the moon good night and closed the curtains on the cold world outside. He made his way slowly down to the warm fire that was waiting for him deep underground. He had his supper and then sat down at his desk to write a letter. When he had finished, he settled down in his rocking chair near the fire. He gently rocked himself to and fro, and soon was fast asleep, having a strange yet wonderful dream like none he'd ever had before. Much to Badger's surprise, he was running. Ahead of him was a very long tunnel. His legs felt strong and sure as he ran towards it. He no longer needed his walking stick, so he left it lying on the floor of the tunnel. Badger moved swiftly, running faster and faster through the long passageway until his paws no longer touched the earth. He felt himself turning end over end, tumbling and falling, but nothing hurt. He felt free. It was as if he had fallen out of his body. The following day, Badger's friends gathered anxiously outside Badger's door. They were worried because he hadn't come out to say good morning as he always did. Fox broke the sad news that Badger was dead and read Badger's note to them. It said simply, "Gone down the long tunnel. Bye-bye, Badger." All the animals had loved Badger, and everybody was very sad. Mole especially felt lost, alone and desperately unhappy. In bed that night, Mole could think only of Badger. Tears rolled down his velvety nose, soaking the blankets he clung to for comfort. Outside it began to snow. Winter had begun, and soon a thick layer of snow hid the animals' homes, where they would stay snug and warm during the cold months. Snow covered the countryside, but it didn't conceal the sadness that Badger's friends felt. Badger had always been there when anyone needed him. The animals all wondered what they would do now that he was gone. Badger had told them not to be unhappy, but it was hard not to be. As spring drew near, the animals often visited each other and talked about the days when Badger was alive. Mole was good at using scissors, and he told about the time Badger had taught him how to cut out a chain of moles from a folded piece of paper. Paper moles had littered the ground that day. Mole remembered the joy he'd felt when he finally succeeded in making a complete chain of moles with all the paws joined. Frog was an excellent skater. He recalled how Badger had helped him take his first slippery steps on the ice. Badger had gently guided him across the ice until he had gained enough confidence to glide out on his own. Fox remembered how, when he was a young cub, he could never knot his tie properly until Badger showed him how. Starting with the wide end of the tie, it's right over left, once around to the back, up, then down through the crossover, and holding the back of the tie, push the knot up to the neck. Fox could now tie every knot ever invented, and some he'd made up himself. And of course his own necktie was perfectly knotted. Badger had given Mrs. Rabbit his special recipe for gingerbread and shown her how to bake gingerbread rabbits. Mrs. Rabbit was well known throughout the countryside for her excellent cooking. As she talked about her first cooking lesson with Badger so long ago, she could almost smell the wonderful fragrance of gingerbread fresh from the oven. Each of the animals had a special memory of Badger, something he had taught them that they could now do extremely well. He had given them each something to treasure, a parting gift that would become all the more special each time it was passed on to others. As the last of the snow melted, so did the animals' sadness. Whenever Badger's name was mentioned, someone remembered another story that made them all smile. One warm spring day, as Mole was walking on the hillside where he'd last seen Badger, he wanted to thank his friend for his parting gift. "Thank you, Badger," he said softly, believing that Badger would hear him. And somehow, Badger did. Join me now in blessing our beloved community with song. Thank you.
May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love and your hands do the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
When I saw that Reverend Sara would speak about death doulas and going with grace, my first thought was, what about those who are robbed of the chance to go with grace? Those who meet a sudden traumatic death. I wondered if there were doulas for them, for their families. There are. and one, I think, could have been such a blessing to my family. No one ever talked about my father's death. I knew from the beginning how he died. On the 4th of July in 1956, when I was 6, he stood by the roadside handing out driver safety information for the National Guard. He was struck and killed by a drunk driver. Although I remember seeing him in the coffin, I fantasized when I was 8 or 9 that he was not really dead. He was undercover for the FBI and would return to me when his important mission was finished. I have no memory of anyone ever talking to me or my younger sisters about his death. My grandmother said, "You girls be good, don't cause your mother trouble." My middle sister remembers that when she sneaked into the kitchen to snitch cookies, she knew her daddy was in heaven watching her, but she knew that he wouldn't mind. It may have been partly just the times, and partly what I think was my mother's autism that meant that we just silently moved on from the world with my father in it to the world where he wasn't. A doula could have helped. I look back and wonder why no one really talked to us. No one saw our need to understand and to grieve, young as we were. All the people who might have stepped into a doula sort of role. So many people might have: a minister, a doctor, a teacher, an aunt or an uncle. Not with any training for the role, but with their heart and their humanity. I look back now with sorrow for my mother. Her rages in those first couple of years and later her depression seem to me now part of her grief. I think she was drowning in stages of grief, the anger and depression that she could never really move beyond. Now, late in life, as I reflect on death and the death doula, I find myself suddenly, unexpectedly, and for the first time, grieving my father's death. I grieve now not so much for what I lost as for my grandfather, who lost his only son too soon. I wish I could talk to my granddaddy now about his grief and about my father. And I grieve for what my father lost in the year when, at 72, I have had 40 more years than my father had. I grieve that he never got to see his 3 daughters grow up, never saw us graduate high school and then college, never got to meet his sons-in-law, never got to celebrate so many birthdays and Christmases with us, never got to hold each of his 5 grandchildren, never got to just be there with us. Even now, so late, a death doula might offer so much healing to us, might be such a blessing to me.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that beautiful reflection. Part of what we seek to create as a community is a space where we can share vulnerably and deeply with one another, where we can share those memories and those deep pains and losses and grief, whether it was from 40 years ago or a few months ago, that we have a space to be able to process together, to understand ourselves and each other just a little bit better each time we do it. So thank you for modeling that for us this morning. And we do that together each week in our service as we open up a space to celebrate joys and to name the sorrows that are on our hearts, to remind one another that we do not journey alone. As we begin, I invite those who are worshiping online to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. And we hold collectively together Larry Fernsworth, husband of Claudia Fernsworth, who just went home from rehab after a big fall and a hip fracture, and he has a long road to go, but is doing well. And we hold Dennis Rockwood and Sharon Rockwood. I was able to visit with them this week as they continue to navigate diagnoses and challenges of Dennis's condition. If you are holding someone in your heart this morning, I invite you to speak their name aloud into your space that we might hold them with you. May the arms of this community hold all of our joys and sorrows, those named and those that remain silent and close to our hearts. May we feel the grace that surrounds us and be transformed by the spirit of life and love, with a warmth to celebrate the joys and a gentleness to soothe our aching hearts. Breathe with me. Fill your body with breath. Breathe into this sacred space. Breathe with this beloved community filled with loving kindness. Breathe with wholeheartedness. Breathe, holding whatever tender sorrows are present for you this morning. Listen to what is calling you in the silence.
from Wendy de Groot, If I Die First. After the burning's done, pour what's left in a mason jar. Nothing new, but one washed clear of applesauce or pickled beets. The clear kind that kids keep fireflies inside. Let my cinders rest there like sand art in jelly jars carried home from the fair. If the small or gray of me unsettles you, pin flannel or fleece around the glass, leaving a gap thumb wide under the rim, enough to let sun and moonlight in. Store me beside the poetry. When it feels right, talk to me, sing, or sit by quietly. For a wheel of seasons, take me down. Hold me open to campfires, fallen leaves, a lilac's laden bough. Press me deep in moss and snow. When my birthday comes, add a pinch of salt, toast to us with good bourbon or dark rum. And when you're ready to move on, release me somewhere we once were. As dust blurs through your fingers, quick or slow, know I miss your touch and let me go.
That has become one of my favorite readings to use in memorial services. I think mostly just because I like it for myself, the idea of being in a simple jar on the bookshelf of poetry. I was 13 years old when my beloved grandmother died in the hospital after years of declining health due to lung cancer. My family had been visiting every night in the weeks prior, but this night, I decided to stay home. And that was the night that she died. I was racked with guilt that I had not been with her at the end. During my childhood, I had spent every Friday night with my grandparents, and my grandma and I were tight. I adored her, and she poured her adoration right back over me, fully embracing her role as doting, spoiling grandmother. She was such a constant source of love and comfort and safety and fun in my life. So after she died, I did not tell a single soul. Not my closest friends, not my teachers. I didn't know how to share how bereft I felt, and I was certain no one would understand. I could have used a death doula then. I don't think anyone in my family really knew what a death doula was at the time, or if that was any kind of burgeoning field. Fast forward 34 years, and here I am studying to become one. During my sabbatical, I enrolled in an end-of-life care training program called Going with Grace. In the years since my grandmother's death, and as I found myself moving through seminary and then hospital chaplaincy, now ministry, and the events in my own life, I've become deeply interested in end-of-life care and how we can make death as meaningful, spiritual, and beautiful as possible, with care and intention, instead of just allowing it to happen to us. A death doula, much like a birth doula, but for the end of life, is someone who provides all the non-medical care and support to the dying person, the family, the circle of support, all the way through the dying process and in the needs just after death. What I appreciate most about the orientation of most death doulas and their training programs is the prioritizing of the spiritual and emotional experience and process of death, rather than merely the practical needs. Those are included too, yes, but they are not the focal point. The program creator, death doula Alua Arthur, shares her mission, like many in her field, to help people not just plan for their death, but in that planning, to better understand what we most value in our lives so that we may find ways to live more fully, more freely. And she poses a powerful question. What must I do to be at peace with myself so that I may live presently and die gracefully? What must I do to be at peace with myself so that I may live presently and die gracefully? Not what should I do or what can I do, but what must? What is that deep longing, that calling? We all still seem to have this cultural fear around talking about death. Sara shared it in her reflection. I didn't talk about it when my grandmother died. Part of this fear might stem from the great mystery of what, if anything, happens after we die. Part of it from the way that effective medical interventions kind of keep us distant from that deep witness and experience of death. And then there is the fear of pain and suffering in the dying process itself, of losing our loved ones, that fear of missing out after we die. And then the fear around how we've lived our lives, our legacy and impact, or fear we may not leave one. And these are real and complicated and valid fears. And like any fear in life, it can cause so much discomfort that we might try to ignore it and become paralyzed by it. So the best thing we can do for ourselves and our loved ones is to begin reflecting and talking about death and dying and grief, and talk about it with others and normalize it as part of our conversations, as part of this spiritual journey that we are all on together. And embrace these conversations as opportunities for learning and meaning making, for inviting greater love and care into our lives and into this community. I know that many of you have recently experienced deaths in your life. It's such a painful and sometimes beautiful experience. And those moments don't always turn out like we imagine. Sometimes, like with my grandmother, people die in the one moment we are not by their side after keeping such dedicated vigil. Sometimes, as Sara shared, they die suddenly and unexpectedly, leaving us reeling without good resources to understand what had happened or our own grief. Sometimes they die in the hospital when everyone, including the dying, wished they could be at home. So as you hear the rest of this sermon, I invite you to be gentle with yourself, those of you that have recently experienced death in your life. Try not to take what you hear as a measurement tool for that death experience, but rather an invitation for greater exploration of your own wishes and desires and deeply held values. In one of the early sessions of our class together, we were asked to reflect upon and write about our own death. If you could choose the final moments, what would they be? What do you see? What do you smell? What's the ambiance? What do you hear? Who is with you? Those kinds of questions. And while I've certainly thought about what I wanted to have happen after I die, what I want done with my body and what kind of service I want, etc. Oddly enough, I don't want a church memorial service. It's weird, I know. And occasionally I've had to consider what if any life-extending measures I wish to employ if faced with such a decision, but I've not had enough deep conversations about these topics with my loved ones. Nor have I really ever taken time to imagine my own actual death and the final moments of life. And it might seem odd to spend time thinking about and writing about this question when really none of us has much control over when and how we die. Sometimes we have a little bits of control. But what I noticed was I got a lot much clearer about the things that were really important to me, about the quality of experience I hope for at the end of life, and how that might inform my choices during and after death. Here is some of what I wrote. I would love to die outside, totally in nature, even if logistically complicated. I want to smell the pine trees. I want to see and hear running water. I would love to see a sunrise or sunset or full moon or some big, beautiful earthly moment. I'd love to have just a few loved ones and friends with me who are ready to help. A gentle combination of love, grief, and joy in being with me. I'd love to smell a campfire, not too smoky, and have one last sip of my favorite cocktail. I'd love to have someone playing acoustic guitar, maybe some familiar, beloved tunes. I want to be warm and comfortable. I want singing. Conversely, I'd also be okay dying in my sleep. I wrote this. But I do fear sudden death might rob me of the chance to truly express my love and care for my family, my friends, especially my children, in the way that I want them to know it at the end of my life, and also every day. But that doesn't always come across. Maybe like Badger, you want to sit in your favorite chair by the fire. I discovered a lot in my reflection about what's important to me both at the end of life and right now. My own words reflect back to me the choices I might make to more fully embrace those hopes and dreams long before death comes. Talking to my kids more openly about death and grief and my experience with it, my fears about it, reminding them how much they mean to me, as much as I might harp on them for picking up their clothes off the floor. Getting as much time in nature as possible, centering those experiences and not allowing the busyness and demands of life to take over such that I let those needs get shoved aside. And if I can't be in the middle of the wilderness when I die, then perhaps my people can bring some of the wilderness to me. Again, Alua's question rings in my head. What must I do to be at peace with myself, that I may live presently and die gracefully? And this question also echoes loudly when we're asked to consider what we want in the face of complications and treatments at the end of life. Because as wonderful as the advancements in medical care have come, sometimes they tend to fight the truth of death so hard and so far that they obscure some of those deeper questions. Dr. Atul Gawande, in his beautiful book, Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End, shares his personal discoveries that he made while writing the book and practicing medicine and the limitations of medicine. He writes this: "The problem with medicine and the institutions it has spawned for the care of the sick and the old is not that they've had an incorrect view of what makes life significant. The problem is that they have had almost no view at all. Medicine's focus is narrow. Medical professionals concentrate on repair of health, not sustenance of the soul. Yet, and this is the painful paradox, he says, we have decided that they should be the ones who largely define how we live in our waning days." Dr. Gawande learned that medicine must help patients discover the deeper reasons we wish to be alive, rather than just pursue a full-throttle fight for basic survival. Survival that oftentimes can compromise one's overall health and well-being at the end. And some of us probably have seen this or experienced this in some way in our own lives and the people of our lives. Quality of life matters. And that quality, those reasons for being alive, may look different for each of us. And so one question we might consider asking ourselves and our loved ones is, what conditions of living are worse than dying? What conditions of living are worse than dying? Dr. Gawande, like many of the experts who offered wisdom in my end-of-life course, suggests a few more vital questions to consider. What is your understanding of the situation and the potential outcomes? What are your fears and hopes? What trade-offs are you willing to make and not make? Once we've begun to answer those, then we can decide together with our loved ones and medical providers the best course of action that serves our particular hopes and visions. On one particular hospital visit I was with a man well into his 90s. He had terminal cancer, which had progressed to the point of requiring a nasal feeding tube and a tracheotomy, and he couldn't really communicate verbally, so all communication was done by writing. Mostly, when I visited him, he was in pretty good spirits, enduring these medical inconveniences with quite a bit of humor and grace, much to my surprise. But during one visit, when he seemed a little down and a little more frustrated than usual, I took a moment, leaned over, and said to him, you don't have to keep doing this. You can stop any of these at any time. He smiled and nodded. He thanked me, and then wrote a note reminding me that he was waiting to see his grandchildren. There was his reason for sticking it out. Good to know, I said. We'll do all we can to help make that happen. They were planning a visit very soon. And as it happened, a few days after that visit, he died. So facing death with grace is about building a relationship with death such that we can make the choices that are most meaningful for us, choices that reflect and support our values and our hopes. But we know the crux of this, too, means that we need to talk about it. We need to share these thoughts with our loved ones, with each other now, before we're facing those questions at the end of life. We need to share them in all stages of our life, too, not just at the end. Sure, our answers may change over time, but that process and conversation will change us. I think back to my grandmother's final days in the hospital. Knowing what I know now, I would have at least brought her the Afghan that she crocheted for me and played her favorite music. I would have invited us to gather around her and share our favorite stories and tell her how much she meant to us, instead of trying to be strong, as my grandfather insisted. I would have liked to have held her hand as she took her last breath. But now, as an adult, I realize that perhaps she chose to die that night when her young granddaughter was not in the room. That was her way of embracing her death in those final moments. And in the end, she found a way of going with grace. I wish that for us all. May it be so. Amen. I want to invite you to join me in a time of meditation followed by a brief prayer. I want to extend this sermon conversation, this vision, by asking you to reflect in a guided meditation on the final moments of your life as you're comfortable. So let's take some breaths together. Let your body just sink into its seat in a comfortable position. Close your eyes if that's helpful for you. And just connect with yourself. And imagine yourself in the final moments of life. Where are you? What surrounds you? What time of day is it? What do you see? What do you smell? What are you hearing? Tune into your heart. What is your emotional state? What is the ambiance? Who's with you? Or around you or nearby? What are you feeling and thinking? Take a moment to breathe and just be in this space you have conjured. When you leave this space today, I invite you to share this meditation with someone in your life and ask them the same questions. Spirit of life and love, holy mystery. May we embrace death with grace, with curiosity and compassion, building a relationship with it, making plans for it, welcoming it as a part of living, guiding our hopes, our dreams, and our visions for the life we have right now, so that when death comes, we might be at peace. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen. invite you to place your hands over your heart and rise in body or spirit for our closing blessing. When evening comes, may we greet it with the peace of knowing we have done all we must do to live presently so that we might die gracefully. We extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the light of love, the light of wisdom, and the light of peace. Blessed are we all. Go in peace.